Welcome to Spaces, built by Bush Construction, a podcast that brings genuine conversations that opens minds to creative ideas in construction, design, and development. We'll share in-depth stories as an experienced commercial contractor and design firm, as well as our candid interviews with business leaders as it relates to the construction industry. So let's get started. We have been moving through our series on construction delivery methods. Today is the fourth episode in the series in which we will be covering the nuances of the design build delivery method. We have talked a lot about teamwork and partnership between the owner, architect, and contractor to ensure a pleasant, successful delivery of your project. The design build delivery method simplifies this team approach as the team functions as one entity working under a single contract with one point of contact for the owner. Thank you for joining in as AJ, Michael, Ali, and I discuss this unique delivery method. So we're here on our fourth episode out of 6 on delivery methods, and today we're going to talk about the design build delivery method. So AJ, can you tell us a little bit about what the design build delivery method is? Some pros, some cons?
You bet. So generally speaking, design build means when an owner of a building project hires one entity to manage that project from both a design and construction perspective, from start to finish. Okay, so design build means the owner's got one contract, one agreement, one source of responsibility for both design and construction. Now this can be done in a couple different ways. One, the owner could hire a contractor who then hires an architect engineering firm, it's called outsourced, to deliver those design services within the contractor's agreement. The other option is for the contractor to have the services in-house, the design and engineering services in-house. This is sometimes called vertical integration, where the contractor can deliver both the design and the construction with the people inside their own building. Okay, so that's really what design build means. Now, pros and cons. There are lots of them, lots of pros and lots of cons. We'll go through them relatively quickly here. So since the owner has a single point of responsibility for design and construction, this is the delivery method where the owner is no longer acting in the role of arbiter or mediator between the contractor and the architect. When there's a disagreement regarding maybe a scope of work or a gap in the scope, the owner says, you two figure it out and let me know when you guys have got to figure it out. Okay? So it is really one source of responsibility, as we often say in the rough and tumble construction business, one neck to choke related to the delivery of their building. Okay, that's one pro. Another pro is that this delivery method typically leads to fewer change orders. So yes, just like every other delivery method, when the owner changes their mind after the budget's been established, there could be a change order. But in this case, if there's a change order related to a gap in the scope, or because the contractor and architect weren't talking sufficiently during the design process, the owner says, once again, you go figure it out. That is not a change order for me. You figure it out internally how that's going to be taken care of. Okay? Another pro associated with the design build delivery method. So another pro of the design build delivery method may not apply to the entire project, but may apply to a certain portion of the project. The one that's typically delivered in design build is the mechanical, electrical, plumbing scope. So in this scope, maybe the contractor hires engineering architecture firm for all the architecture, the structural engineering, the civil engineering, but in the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, MEP, they hire trade contractors or subcontractors to design and build those systems. So one of the pros here is that in the selection of those contractors, those trade contractors, the contractor, the general contractor, the design builder in this case, says, I want you to achieve this minimum standard of design. Okay? And you can accomplish it in any way you like, but you must maintain this minimum standard. To win the project, the trade contractor, subcontractor, must then be very, very efficient with their design. Okay, so it is a matter of win or lose in the design aspect of that system, whether or not that trade contractor will be awarded. Alternatively, when design of engineering and mechanical systems is outsourced, the engineer might say, I'm not being awarded this project based on my design efficiency. Instead, I'd rather put in a safety of factor to make sure the mechanical systems work exactly like they're intended and maybe even a little bit better than intended. And that is where cost increases lie in a design, because there's some aspect of construction that got more expensive because the system was quote unquote over-designed. Okay? In the design build delivery method, if it's done correctly, those should be eliminated or reduced. Now I say if they're delivered correctly, because this is, as you can imagine, a really complex delivery method. And for a contractor who has not delivered mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems in a design build delivery method before successfully, I'd steer away from doing that because it is more complex, as you might imagine. Finally, a fourth pro to be considered is that when design build is done in-house, so I mentioned before, it can be either be outsourced or insourced. When it is insourced, it is quite often more efficient for the designer inside the company, the construction company, to lean across the cue ball and say, hey, estimator, what will it cost me to switch exterior materials from brick to stone? And very quickly, the estimator can answer that. Versus an engineer who's sitting 2 or 3 or 200 miles away, picking up the phone and calling, inconveniencing an estimator that may not be available right then. There's just a level of efficiency that happens when both those services are delivered in-house. Okay. Those are the pros. The cons. There is a belief, and there's probably some reality to the perception that an architect's hands are somewhat tied in the design build delivery method. So, as the architect communicates, it is often through the filter of the contractor. So the architect doesn't have a straight line of communication with the owner without sort of going through the contractor first. Now, by all means, when we deliver design build in-house, our architects in-house talk directly with the owner, and that's the way it should occur. However, the contractual relationship flows through the contractor. So there is some element of oversight that the contractor, the design builder in this case, provides over the design services. And here's where it really gets to be a rub, because the architect says, I think the owner needs a building that accomplishes these interior creature comfort aspects. The contractor says, I realize, Mr. Architect, Mrs. Architect, that you want to have those creature comforts, but the budget can't achieve it. And in this case, when the design builder, the contractor, is holding the contract of the designer may in this case have a less ability to make their argument with the owner and get those creature comforts incorporated into the building. So there is a perception and likely a reality that some elements of the architect, engineer's ability to design freely is a little bit stifled. Okay, another disadvantage of this system is that the owner has only one contract and therefore no ability to have a check and balance on the system. And the construction manager is agent, construction manager is constructor, or general contractor delivery method. If the owner doesn't like the answer of the architect, they can say, hey, contractor, what do you think about this? Or vice versa. If they don't like the contractor's answer, they can ask the architect. Two very different independent opinions. In this case, they have the opinion of the contractor only, while they also have the opinion of the designer, the architect. Again, it may somewhat be diminished. The impact of that opinion may somewhat be diminished because the information is flowing through the hands of the contractor. Finally, as I mentioned before, in the case of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, when systems are designed to achieve a minimum standard and no better than that, while that's very, very efficient system design, there are cases when design calculations are missed. And in that case, there is a better chance for the system to be under-designed or for that owner to not quite be satisfied with that absolute minimum standard. And in that case, the engineer architect who is outsourced and has an independent agreement with the owner actually has a better approach because there is a safety factor to make sure that the minimum standard is achieved. So the potential for there to be an under-designed system exists more in the design build delivery method. Is that complex enough?
That was great. I liked it. So many questions about that. So do you have any going right now, Michael or Allie?
I think one thing I would kind of maybe build on or add to is the stifling of design or general stifling of the design team. I think it's a very real thing, just like AJ brought up. I also think it's very important to pick the right team, because the right team on both sides won't allow that to happen. I think we talked about healthy tension maybe in the CMA one or a previous conversation, which is you got to have both sides of the team who are willing to stand for what they stand for to a certain extent, and then come to an agreement on what makes the most sense for the owner. If you've got one that's kind of too powerful, so to speak, over the other, you will stifle one way or the other. It can go both ways, from architect to contractor and back and forth. But I think it's all about picking the right team and you can really mitigate that.
So to tag onto what Michael just said, from an owner's perspective, if you are determining, I would like to use design build, how would you go about building that team? How would you go about making sure that you have that healthy tension? Do you ask for teams that have worked together before in the past, or what would be the best path?
I can add a little bit to that, just per my previous comment. I think it's request to meet everybody on your team, and not just don't just meet the contractor and then say, oh, we've got a design team over here who we're going to hire. They're great. You want to meet the design team too, I think, as the owner, because you're going to get a feel for, is that design, what's the interest? What does the design team kind of stand for? What do they align with you or don't they? And then same for the contractor. It's not just, we're going to pick this design build contractor and then trust that the design team behind closed doors is going to provide the product we want. Nobody can design in a bubble, and we can't build estimates and things in a bubble. Everybody's got to kind of work together. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I agree, and that's a really important point. The value of the architect engineer in the design build delivery method is no less than every other delivery method. And the owner should expect to understand how the engineer and architect design, their thought process, and it's just as important in design build as every other one. So by all means, when you're interviewing the contractor, also interview the designer. No matter what the delivery format, interview both of them with the same scrutinizing eye as an owner. And I tell you, you mentioned this, both of you mentioned this, pick a team that has worked together before in the past. Design build can be a complex delivery method. It can be a very, very efficient one. But doing it for the first time with a partner, a contractor, engineer, architect partner, doing it together for the first time, you may run into some things you didn't anticipate happening. So picking a team that has done it before is quite often one of the things that the owners like to use in their selection criteria.
I want to add that too, that when we talk about picking a team and we talk about the fact that we're vertically integrated and have the whole in-house thing, when you're picking a team with us, you're not just picking us. It's definitely open to all of our architect and engineering partners. There's plenty of them who are much better at projects that we're simply just not going to approach from a design aspect. So when you come to your team, if it's us or whomever, make sure that it's not just, well, here's our in-house design team and it's going to be that. It's everybody. So we're very cognizant of the fact that there's firms out there who are going to do a much better job on a certain project than we are, and it's much more in their wheelhouse, or they have a much better resume. And it's no issue for us to either team or handle projects that we can be very good and efficient at in-house.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. And I'll tell you, when a designer, engineer, architect firm is selected for a project, it is much more relevant in hiring a designer to make sure they have experience in that specific building type and that specific industry. For contractors, it's bricks, mortar, steel, dirt, concrete. For us, it's like putting a Lego set together. We just have to coordinate it all. But the real insight into how that building should operate and flow rests on the shoulders of the engineer and architect firm. So as Michael mentioned, just because you've got a design build firm with in-house design capabilities doesn't mean that firm should design your building. It is really, really important to make sure that if they do have in-house design services, if that is within their area of expertise, specific expertise to design that building, great. Go ahead and use them. If it's not within their expertise, it may not be the best choice for, in this case, vertical integration, all done in-house under one roof with a contractor with in-house design services.
So as an owner, how do you make sure you don't lose that choice and control, given your direct relationship is with the contractor?
Trust. You got to trust the contractor you're going to, because I think you admit to it, you could. You just gotta trust your team and and you got to trust that the contractor, just like we said, will partner with somebody who's a better fit for the project. You got to trust that your contractor is looking out for your best interests and is going to pick the team that's right for your project.
And trust quite often relies upon past experience. So maybe an owner who has done a project in the past says, I like the way my project was delivered, but there's got to be a better way of doing this. I got too involved in the details. I'm going to be at a high level. I don't need to be in the weeds. Let me hire the contractor who I've worked with in the past, but who will have a greater responsibility to oversee the design also, since I don't have the bandwidth, maybe because my business is pulling me away, I don't have the bandwidth to oversee that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a great question, Allie. And since Bush has done this before with outside partners and in-house partner, do we have a process or a system or a tool that we use that we can at least keep the owner informed about design changes and what those are going to cost? And what do we do to help at least let the owner stay on track and in the know?
So from a cost tracking perspective, we use the same tool in design build that we use in the 2CM delivery methods. It's called a trend estimate log. And during the course of the pre-construction phase, we keep track of all the things that were either added or reduced from the scope of work that we understood to be included on day one. And through that, the owner has really a day by day, week by week view of where their budget currently stands. Even though maybe an estimate hasn't been wholesale updated for a month or two, they've got a pretty good understanding where their costs lie because of all the changes that have been made. So that is the tool we use, whether it's design build or any other delivery method where we're involved in the pre-construction process to really track the budget.
So if I'm driving around and I'm getting ready to build a building and I've already engaged you and I saw this really cool concept in this one building and I bring it to you and your team and say, make this happen for me. You would plug it in there at least and show me, sure, we can do that. It's going to cost you X dollars, or it would keep you on track. And
I can speak to that a little bit, and I think I can speak to it from both, again, the internal and the outsourced process, which is the way our kind of process works is day one, as the owner, you're probably going to meet the whole team. You're going to meet your pre-construction manager who's responsible for budget. You're going to meet your design team lead who's responsible for design, probably a project executive who's kind of overseeing everything, and then possibly project manager, superintendent, all the way down the line. That's your kickoff meeting, right? Just to kind of meet everybody. From that point on, it's made very clear who is your point of communication through any given process. So typically it's going to be your design contact through the design process, and we're going to have a pre-construction manager in the background kind of checking things. As you transition into a bidding phase, it's going to become your pre-construction manager as your main point of contact, and then into construction becomes your project manager. So our whole thing is to keep the point of contact where it needs to be, let design kind of do their thing during the design and just hang out in the background, and then really kind of switch that out, so to speak. So when you come in, you're going to meet everybody, but we try to keep it simple so that you don't have 5 to 7 people emailing you at any given time. It's really one point of contact at any given time. But behind the scenes, everybody's got their role in keeping the kind of checks and balances going.
That's a good answer from a teamwork and communication flow and expectations perspective. You know, you mentioned, Amy, the drive-by building. Hey, can you build this for me? We've actually had that happen before. And I'll tell you, it's actually easier to design build a building when they say, I want that, and point to something that's already been constructed, than to say, I've got this vision in my head. Can you design this thing? Because it's already, again, we're trying to replicate a building that's already been constructed. So as you can imagine, design build, there's a whole lot of questions that need to be answered, and a lot of them need to be answered up front because we can render a budget very, very early in the process. Let me mention one example, a project we did in the past. We received a single document showing basically an elevation and a floor plan for an automobile dealership. The owner said to us, I want to have a firm price to deliver this building to me in X number of months, but I need your firm price back in 2 weeks. So we brought that in-house. We put our heads together with our design and construction folks, came up with a cost for the design, a cost for the construction, and upon that one drawing, the owner selected us to build their automobile dealership based on a 2-week estimating phase in a single document. So that is one of the efficiencies you can gain through the design build delivery method.
Yeah, I'll add some to that. And just keep in mind I'm an architect, so I don't think I'm supposed to love this design build delivery. Maybe I do because the boss is sitting in the same room right now. But one thing I wrote down here is I firmly believe design build is the best method to determine project feasibility and in the quickest way possible. Because you come in, you're going to have basically everybody at the table who knows their pieces. Just like he's talked, we've had multiple people come through the room, and a lot of these projects, they didn't pan out because feasibility maybe didn't go, or it didn't cash flow with the owner's business or whatever. Lots of them did go, and they come in and they say, hey, I've got this idea. I have no idea how to approach this idea. Here's our estimator. Here's our project executive. Here's our design team. In just a short period of time, we can turn around. This is what this looks like, plus or minus. Do we need to go to the next stage? And there's no cost to that. I mean, you come in and it's a pretty quick kind of gut check process.
Yeah, that process versus where the owner quite often goes out and hires an engineer and architecture firm to do some level of design. And they might pay $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to have that design and then go take it to a contractor and realize, oh no, I can't achieve my budget. Well, what happens then? You scale the project down to a point where maybe it's not even functional for the owner, or is there some other aspect you change in the project? Through the design build delivery method, it can be a more efficient way of finding out, as Michael mentioned, the project feasibility, and maybe a quicker and a less costly, with a quicker and a less costly approach.
That's a good segue, I think, into what type of owner is the best for a design build delivery method? Like, what would I be, what would be my characteristics, an owner characteristic that would want to pick this?
Believe it or not, it's actually two ends of the spectrum. There are very complex owners who can manage really complex projects who choose this, and also ones on the very other end where they say, I don't want to be involved in the details, I don't know how this works, take care of it for me. So another real world example, we managed the design and construction of a blast resistant building. And the owner, in this case, very complex organization, very savvy, they build buildings all over the place. They said, here's my engineering standard. This building needs to be functional. I don't really care what it looks like, but I want this building to be functional, and here's my engineering standard. They gave that to us, and after a few weeks, we rendered a cost opinion on what the whole building would take to build and design. We were hired for the project, and then we designed the building, this blast-resistant building for the owner. Very function-driven, but an owner able to manage a complex design-build delivery process. In that case, of an owner very savvy in construction and design, benefited from the design-build delivery method. On the flip side, there may be an owner who says, I don't have the time or capacity to manage a construction project or the design project, and I don't want to be involved in all the discussions. Give me an update every week or so what's going on, and if I see something in the design I don't like, I'll let you know, but I trust my contractor and architect partners to do and listen and design and build, go make it happen for me. So believe it or not, it's two opposite ends of the spectrum where design build most often makes sense.
Yeah, and I would touch on the kind of the second end of the spectrum you talked about, which is the small business owner-operator. If you're the owner-operator or owner-practitioner or whatever, you got to run a business every single day. And we'll talk about the owner delivery method in the future, but it can get painful fast, and we're going to filter 90% of the stuff will never get to you, and the stuff that's important will get to you by way of controlled, once a week communication. So small business owner operator, there's not a better delivery method. And then another thing we often hear is you guys are too big for the small business owner operator because I see your signs all over or whatever. Not the case. This is great for small projects, and it's great for that size and that level of project.
So let me touch again, Ali, on your question on control and choice. In the design build delivery method, the owner always has control and always has choice, but only to the extent that they want it, which is really nice about the design build delivery method. Through the pre-construction process, the contractor and architect get a sense of how much control and how much choice the owner wants and all the decisions that need to be made. And that's why this delivery method works well for many different owners, because it is really an iterative process where we get a sense of how much do you want to be involved in the decision making. There should be no loss of control or loss of choice for the owner with a design, build, delivery method. However, to the extent that the owner consciously wants to get rid of the responsibility to be in charge of control and choice, they can have those be taken care of by the design builder.
Which kind of relates to our points about time savings and cost efficiencies in terms of if I'm an owner who's wanting to run my operations and I don't have time, this delivery method benefits. I trust you, we've met, versus those who do have maybe a little bit more time to spend asking questions. So I think you're getting the best of both worlds.
I agree.